The coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but Colonel Kiera Havelock didn't notice. Her office at Naval Special Warfare Command sat 3 floors below ground level, insulated from the San Diego sun by reinforced concrete and classification protocols that made Fort Knox look transparent. On the wall behind her desk hung a single photograph granny, taken from a helicopter gun camera over Helmand Province in 2009. If you knew where to look, you could see the dust trail of an extraction convoy racing toward a downed Chinook. What the photo didn't show was the A-10 Warthog that had turned 6 Taliban technical vehicles into scrap metal in 47 seconds. Kiera had been 26 then, call sign Reaper 6, and the Marines she'd saved never learned her name. Now at 41, she coordinated every SEAL team operation across 3 continents from this bunker, her face unknown to 90% of the operators whose lives depended on her decisions. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent 15 years becoming invisible, and invisibility had become her greatest tactical advantage. The phone on her desk buzzed. Not the secure line, the regular office extension. "Ma'am, there's a situation topside," her aide said, tension clipping his words short. "Physical altercation at the visitor checkpoint. MPs are requesting your presence." Kiera's jaw tightened. She had a briefing with DEVGRU in 20 minutes, satellite imagery from Yemen that couldn't wait. "Can't security handle it? They're asking for you specifically, ma'am. It's complicated." She was already moving, muscle memory from 2 decades of service overriding her irritation. The elevator climbed 3 floors in silence. When the doors opened, the California heat hit her like a wall, but it was the scene at the checkpoint that stopped her cold. A woman in civilian clothes, jeans, leather jacket, sunglasses hiding half her face stood perfectly still, while a Marine lance corporal gripped her arm hard enough to leave marks. 2 more Marines flanked them, hands near their sidearms, faces showing that peculiar combination of aggression and uncertainty that comes when training meets a situation the manual didn't cover. "Ma'am," the lance corporal said, not loosening his grip, "this individual attempted to bypass security. She's refusing to provide proper identification." The woman turned her head slightly, and even through the sunglasses, Kiera saw something familiar in the angle of her jaw, the set of her shoulders. "Let her go," Kiera said quietly. The Marine's grip tightened instead. "With respect, Colonel, she's a security risk. We found these in her vehicle." He gestured to a table where someone had laid out the contents of a search: tactical maps, encrypted radio equipment, and a leather case containing what looked like diplomatic credentials. Kiera moved closer, her boots silent on the concrete. The credentials bore a seal she recognized: Defense Intelligence Agency, Special Activities Division. The photograph showed the same woman, though the name had been redacted with black bars thick enough to hide everything except a middle initial. "I said let her go." This time her voice carried the weight of command that had sent strike packages into hostile territory. The lance corporal hesitated, then released his grip. The woman rolled her shoulder once, testing the range of motion, before removing her sunglasses. Her eyes were the color of winter sky over the Hindu Kush, and when they met Kara's, recognition flashed between them like voltage. "Hello, Reaper," the woman said softly. Kiera's world tilted. She knew that voice. She'd heard it over tactical radio during the worst 3 hours of her life, back when she'd been a captain flying close air support missions that weren't supposed to exist. Woman smiled, and it didn't reach her eyes. "I believe we have some catching up to do." The Marines were watching now, confused by the sudden shift in atmosphere. Kiera's mind raced through a dozen scenarios, each more troubling than the last. DIA didn't send field operatives to Naval Special Warfare Command for social calls. They sent them when operations were compromised, when someone needed to disappear, or when the situation had deteriorated beyond the point where official channels could function. "Clear the checkpoint," Kiera ordered. "This area is now under operational security protocols. Anyone without TSSCI clearance, fall back to the secondary perimeter." The Marines moved immediately, years of training overriding curiosity. Within 30 seconds, Kiera and the stranger stood alone in a circle of sunlight and shadow, separated from the rest of the base by 50 meters of empty asphalt, and the weight of shared history neither had spoken about in over a decade. "You shouldn't be here," Kiera said. The woman's smile turned sad. "I know, but we have a problem and you're the only person who can fix it." She pulled a slim folder from inside her jacket. How she'd gotten it past the initial search, Kiera couldn't guess, and held it out. "DVGRU Team 3. They went dark 72 hours ago in the Panjshir Valley. The agency thinks they're compromised. The Pentagon thinks they're dead. I think they're exactly where they're supposed to be, doing exactly what you trained them to do." Kiera took the folder, her fingers steady despite the adrenaline beginning to flood her system. Inside were satellite photos, communications intercepts, and a tactical brief that should never have left SCIF space. "How did you?" "Same way I always do. I asked questions nobody wanted to answer and followed the silence until it screamed." Kiera flipped through the pages, her tactical mind automatically processing terrain features, egress routes, and the glaring absence of any extraction plan. Team 3 had gone in Light 6 operators, minimal support, objective classified even from her until this moment. The last verified communication had been a burst transmission 48 hours ago. 2 words in phonetic alphabet followed by coordinates that placed the team 15 clicks from any known target. "This doesn't make sense," Kiera muttered, more to herself than her companion. Team 3's mission was reconnaissance only. Why would they push this deep without support? "Because someone changed the mission parameters after they were already in country," the woman said, "and that someone didn't want official channels knowing about it." The implications hit Kiera like shrapnel. Rogue taskings meant off-book operations, which meant deniable assets, which meant if Team 3 got burned, nobody was coming for them. She'd seen this movie before, back when she'd flown missions that officially never happened, and it always ended the same way: good operators bleeding out in the dark while politicians rewrote history. "I need secure comms," Kiera said, already walking toward the main building. The woman fell into step beside her, moving with the fluid economy of someone who'd spent years in the field. "Already arranged. Your aide thinks you're in an emergency briefing with SOCOM. You have 90 minutes before anyone asks questions." They descended into the bunker in silence, the elevator's hum filling the space between them. Kiera's mind was already 3 steps ahead, running contingencies, calculating response times, weighing risks against the lives of 6 operators she'd personally vetted for special warfare duty. The secure communications room sat behind 3 locked doors and a biometric scanner that read Kiera's palm print, retinal pattern, and probably her soul for all she knew. Inside, banks of encrypted equipment hummed with the constant chatter of global Operation SEAL teams training in Little Creek, reconnaissance flights over the South China Sea, submarine movements in the Arctic Circle. Kiera moved to a terminal in the corner, isolated from the main network, and powered it up. "Start from the beginning," she said. "Everything you know, everything you suspect, and everything you're not telling me." The woman settled into a chair, and for the first time since the checkpoint confrontation, she looked tired. "Do you remember Syria, 2016? The convoy that wasn't supposed to exist?" Kiera's fingers paused over the keyboard. She remembered. 6 vehicles moving at midnight through contested territory, carrying cargo so classified that even the drivers didn't know what they were transporting. She provided overwatch in an F-16, orbiting at 20,000 feet while her sensors tracked heat signatures and radio traffic. The ambush had come from 3 sides, simultaneously coordinated, professional, indicating enemy intelligence that shouldn't have existed. "I remember pulling surveillance while someone ran interdiction. Never got confirmation on who." "That was me," the woman said quietly. "Ground team, operating under DIA protocols. We got the package out, but it cost us 3 good people. The after-action report listed it as equipment failure during a training exercise." Kiera turned to face her fully. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because the same signature is all over Team 3's disappearance. Same communication patterns, same intelligence leaks, same smell of an operation that's been compromised before it started. Someone inside our community is running parallel ops, and they're using our people as disposable assets." The words hung in the air like cordite smoke. Kiera had suspected internal compromise before. It was impossible to run special operations for 2 decades without encountering the occasional bad actor. But this was different. This was systematic, organized, and apparently ongoing. "You have proof?" she asked. The woman pulled a thumb drive from her pocket and set it on the console. Enough to start asking very dangerous questions, not enough to know who's asking them back. Kiera picked up the drive, weighing it in her palm. Less than an ounce of plastic and silicon containing what evidence? Intelligence. A career-ending investigation disguised as data files. She'd been down similar roads before, and they never led anywhere good. But 6 operators were missing, and if there was even a chance they were still alive. "I'll need to brief my command," Kiera said. "This goes up the chain." "No," the woman's voice cut through the room like a blade. "The moment you put this into official channels, whoever's running this operation will know we're onto them. Team 3 disappears permanently, and we lose our only chance to find out who's really pulling strings." Kiera's jaw tightened. She'd spent her entire career following protocols, respecting chain of command, trusting the system that had shaped her from a headstrong pilot into someone who coordinated the most sensitive military operations on the planet. What this woman was suggesting violated every principle she'd built her reputation on. "You're asking me to run an unsanctioned operation," Kiera said flatly. "I'm asking you to save 6 operators who are counting on someone to do the right thing instead of the approved thing," the woman countered. "There's a difference, and you know it." Kiera did know it. She'd lived that difference in cockpits over Afghanistan, making split-second decisions that the after-action reports would spend months analyzing. She'd felt it in her chest every time she'd sent teams into hot zones, weighing mission success against the lives of people she'd come to know, to respect, to care about in ways the manual said commanders shouldn't. The computer monitor flickered, casting blue light across her face. On the screen, satellite imagery showed the Panjshir Valley in stunning clarity, mountains like broken teeth, rivers threading through valleys that had swallowed armies for thousands of years. Somewhere in that terrain, 6 Americans were either fighting for survival or already past saving. "What's your plan?" Kiera asked. The woman leaned forward, and for the first time since entering the base, something like relief crossed her features. "First, we confirm Team 3's last position. Your satellite access can track movement patterns that civilian systems miss. Second, we identify who changed their mission parameters. That means diving into classified tasking orders that officially don't exist. Third, we find out who benefits from Team 3 being exposed." "And fourth?" Kiera asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Fourth, we go get them ourselves." The audacity of it was breathtaking. 2 women, neither of whom had been in active combat operations for years, proposing to launch an unsanctioned extraction into one of the most dangerous regions on Earth. It was insane. It was impossible. It was exactly the kind of operation that Kiera had built her entire career learning how to execute. She inserted the thumb drive and opened the first file. The data spilled across her screen in columns of metadata, communication timestamps, and geolocation markers that painted a picture more disturbing than she'd anticipated. Someone had been tracking SEAL team movements for months, cataloging patterns, identifying vulnerabilities, and apparently selling that information to the highest bidder. But the real revelation was in the secondary files: financial transactions traced through shell companies in Dubai, encrypted communications routed through servers in Eastern Europe, and a pattern of compromised operations dating back 3 years. Every mission that had gone sideways, every unexplained casualty, every intelligence failure that had cost American lives. "How long have you been tracking this?" Kiera asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 18 months. Since I realized that too many good people were dying in situations that shouldn't have been survivable." The woman stood and moved to the wall map showing global operations. "It's not just SEAL teams. Force Recon Delta, SAD operators, anyone running high-risk missions in denied territory. Someone is making millions selling our people out." Kiera felt cold fury building in her chest. the kind that came before decisions that couldn't be unmade. She dedicated her life to protecting the people who ran toward danger, and the thought that someone inside her own community was profiting from their deaths made her want to burn the whole system down just to find the rot. But fury wasn't tactical. Fury got people killed. She needed to think like the pilot she'd been, the one who'd learned to separate emotion from execution even when her heart was screaming. "I need to see Team 3's original mission brief," Kiera said. "Everything they were told before insertion." The woman nodded and pulled up another file. The brief was sparse standard reconnaissance of a suspected Taliban logistics hub, no direct action authorized, extraction window in 72 hours. Simple, clean, low risk by special operations standards. Then Kiera saw the amendment, filed 6 hours after the team had crossed into Afghanistan. New coordinates, expanded mission parameters, authorization for direct action against high-value targets. The signature line showed approval from someone at JSOC, but the authentication codes were wrong, subtle, almost undetectable unless you knew what to look for, but wrong nonetheless. "Someone spoofed the authorization," Kiera said. "Sent Team 3 after a target that doesn't exist, or worse, into a trap that's been waiting for them. Which means they're either captured or pinned down, waiting for support that's never coming," the woman agreed. "And we have maybe 48 hours before the situation becomes unsalvageable." Kiera pulled up a classified database that tracked friendly forces in theater. No official rescue operation was being planned. No reconnaissance flights had been tasked to the area. As far as the Pentagon was concerned, Team 3 was maintaining operational security in a fluid environment, military speak, for "we don't know where they are, but we're pretending that's part of the plan." "I can't authorize an extraction without going through proper channels," Kiera said, adding the words even as she spoke them. "And proper channels will get them killed." The woman's voice was flat, factual, carrying the weight of someone who'd watched bureaucracy murder good people before. Kiera turned away from the screens, her mind churning through options that all looked like different flavors of impossible. She could push this up to the Admiral, but without hard proof of internal compromise, it would look like paranoia. She could leak it to friendly contacts in Congress, but that would take weeks to generate action. She could follow protocol and trust the system she devoted her life to serving. Or she could trust her gut, which was screaming that 6 operators were running out of time while she debated procedure. "I need 12 hours, Kiera said finally. 12 hours to confirm Team 3's position and identify who's really pulling strings on this operation. After that, we make the call." The woman studied her face, searching for something: commitment, courage, or maybe just the same reckless determination that had kept them both alive through years of impossible situations. 12 hours, she agreed. "But after that, I'm going in with or without official support. Those men deserve at least one person willing to break the rules for them." Kiera didn't argue. She understood the sentiment better than most. In her years coordinating special operations, she'd learned that the difference between a hero and a martyr often came down to whether someone with power was willing to risk everything when the system failed. Been that person before, making calls that could have ended her career and she was still standing. Maybe that meant something. Maybe it just meant her luck hadn't run out yet. "What's your name?" Kiera asked suddenly. "Your real name, not whatever the DIA has on file." The woman smiled slightly. "Does it matter?" "It does if we're going to trust each other." A long pause filled with the hum of classified electronics and the weight of histories neither had fully shared. "Alexis," the woman said finally. "Alexis Corvin, though the last time someone used my real name was at my father's funeral 6 years ago." Kiera nodded slowly. "Okay, Alexis, let's find your team." They worked through the night, 2 women hunched over glowing screens in a bunker beneath San Diego while halfway around the world. 6 operators counted the hours until sunrise and wondered if anyone was coming. Kiera pulled satellite feeds, communications intercepts, and drone footage, building a picture of movement in the Panjshir Valley that told a story the official reports had missed. Team 3 hadn't gone silent. They'd been jammed. Professional-grade electronic warfare that required equipment the Taliban didn't possess. Someone had boxed them in, cut their communications, and left them isolated in terrain that made extraction nearly impossible. "There," Kiera said, pointing to a thermal signature on the screen. "3 structures in a ravine, heat patterns consistent with human occupation. That's them." Alexis leaned closer, studying the imagery. "That's also a perfect kill box. 1 way in, 1 way out, elevated positions on 3 sides. If someone wanted to trap a SEAL team and take them alive, this is where you do it." "Why alive?" Kiera asked, though she was already forming the answer in her mind. "Dead operators are a tragedy. Alive, they're leverage. Whoever set this up wants something more valuable than body count." Kiera felt the pieces clicking into place, forming a picture that made her stomach turn. This wasn't about killing Americans. It was about creating a crisis that could be exploited, hostages that could be ransomed, intelligence that could be extracted, a geopolitical incident that could shift policy in ways that benefited someone with access to classified mission planning, someone who knew exactly how special operations worked, someone inside their own community. She pulled up personnel files, cross-referencing everyone who'd had access to Team 3's mission parameters. 43 names appeared on her screen: officers, analysts, support staff who'd touched the operation in some way. Too many to investigate individually, too few to hide in if you knew what patterns to look for. "Run financial analysis on everyone with access," Kiera said. "Look for unusual transactions, offshore accounts, anything that suggests money flowing from non-standard sources." Alexis's fingers flew across her own keyboard, pulling data from systems that probably violated 6 different federal laws. Kiera decided she didn't want to know where the access was coming from. "Got something," Alexis said after 20 minutes. "Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb, assigned to JSOC Operations Planning. 3 payments in the last 6 months, each for $50,000, routed through a consulting firm in Dubai that exists only on paper." Kiera pulled up Webb's file. 15 years of service, decorated career, specialization in mission planning and intelligence analysis. The perfect position to know which operations were happening, which teams were going where, and exactly how to compromise them without leaving obvious traces. "He's currently assigned where?" Kiera asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "Right here," Alexis said quietly. "Naval Special Warfare Command, 3 floors up from where we're sitting." The irony was vicious. The person selling out SEAL teams had been working in the same building where Kiera coordinated their operations, walking the same halls, sitting through the same briefings, smiling at the same colleagues he was murdering for profit. "We need to confirm this before we move," Kiera said, forcing herself to think tactically. "One person taking money doesn't prove they're the leak. Could be gambling debts, family problems, a dozen legitimate explanations. Or it could be exactly what it looks like," Alexis countered. "How many coincidences do you need before you call it a pattern?" Kiera didn't have an answer for that. In her experience, coincidences in special operations were usually just enemy action you hadn't identified yet. But she also knew that moving on Webb without solid proof would blow the entire investigation, alert whoever else might be involved, and potentially doom Team 3 to whatever fate their captors had planned. "We watch him," Kiera said. 24-hour surveillance, track all communications, see who he contacts and what information he's accessing. If he's the leak, he'll make contact with his handlers. When he does, we'll have proof." Alexis looked like she wanted to argue, but years of operational experience had apparently taught her the same lessons Kiera had learned: patience, however agonizing, was often the difference between success and catastrophic failure. "Fine," Alexis said. "But while we're watching Webb, I'm reaching out to some contacts who can put together an extraction package off the books. If we confirm Team 3's position and Webb makes a move, we need to be ready to act immediately." Kiera nodded. "Agreed, but nothing moves without my authorization. We do this smart, or we don't do it at all." They spent the next 6 hours building a surveillance plan that wouldn't trigger Webb's suspicion. Kiera called in favors from analysts she trusted, set up monitoring on Webb's email and phone traffic, and arranged for his vehicle to be tagged with a GPS tracker that technically violated the Fourth Amendment but fell into the gray area of internal security investigations. By 600, They had eyes on their target. Webb arrived at the command center at 6:45, exactly as he had every day for the past 8 months. He carried a coffee from the base Starbucks, wore his uniform with the precision of someone who'd never quite left the parade ground behind, and smiled at the receptionist with a warmth that made Kiera's skin crawl. That was the worst part of betrayal. It looked exactly like loyalty until the moment it didn't. Kiera watched him on the security feed, feeling the weight of what she was considering. If Webb was clean, this investigation would destroy his career and her reputation. If he was dirty and she moved too slowly, 6 operators would pay the price for her caution. There was no good answer, only choices that led to different kinds of damage. He's accessing Team 3's file, an analyst said over the secure line, pulling up current status reports and communication logs. Kiera's jaw tightened. That's not unusual for his position. He has legitimate reasons to review ongoing operations. Except he's copying the files to a personal drive, the analyst continued. Encrypted but definitely off-network. That changed things. Reviewing files was normal. Copying them to personal storage was a violation of basic security protocols and suggested someone planning to move information outside controlled channels. Stay on him, Kiera ordered. I want to know every byte that leaves this building. Webb worked through the morning, apparently focused on routine tasks. But at 11:30, he took a break, walked to his car in the parking lot, and made a phone call on a device that wasn't his issued military phone. The analyst tracking him couldn't intercept the call. Webb had apparently learned some operational security, but they could track the number he dialed. It routed through 3 different countries before terminating at a server in Moscow. Got you, Kiera whispered. Alexis appeared at her shoulder studying the data trail. That's not just a security violation, that's espionage. We need to move on him now. Kiera shook her head. Not yet. We need to know who he's working with, what they know about Team 3, and whether there are other compromised operations. If we arrest him now, the network goes dark and we lose everything. And if we wait, Team 3 runs out of time, Alexis shot back. The argument hung between them, 2 different philosophies of warfare clashing in a bunker beneath California. Kiera had spent her career thinking strategically, playing the long game, accepting small losses to achieve larger victories. Alexis had apparently spent hers in the tactical immediacy of field operations, where the only thing that mattered was the mission in front of you and the people counting on you to succeed. Neither approach was wrong. Neither was entirely right. 48 hours, Kiera said finally. We give it 48 hours to see if Webb makes another move or contacts other conspirators. If he doesn't, or if Team 3's situation deteriorates, we act immediately. Alexis's expression said she didn't like it, but she nodded. 48 hours. But I'm using that time to assemble an extraction team. People I trust, off-book operators who won't ask questions we can't answer. Kiera knew she should object, should cite regulations and proper authorization and all the other constraints that had kept her career intact for 2 decades. But she also knew that Alexis was right. If this went sideways, they'd need people willing to operate outside the system, and those people required time to mobilize. Do it, Kiera said. But keep it small, keep it quiet, and make sure everyone understands this is deniable. If it goes wrong, I can't protect them. If it goes wrong, protection won't matter, Alexis said grimly. We'll all be too dead to worry about it. She left the bunker, moving with the quick efficiency of someone shifting from planning to action. Kiera watched her go, then turned back to the screens showing Webb's movements, Team 3's last known position, and the sprawling network of intelligence that suggested the problem went deeper than one corrupt officer. Her phone buzzed. The secure line marked priority. She picked up. Colonel Havelock, this is Admiral Morrison. I need you in my office immediately. We have a situation. Kiera's blood ran cold. Morrison commanded naval special warfare and knew about every operation Kiera ran. If he was calling an emergency meeting, either something had gone catastrophically wrong or someone had noticed her investigation into Webb. Neither option ended well. On my way, sir, she said, keeping her voice steady despite the adrenaline spike. She climbed 3 floors to Morrison's office, each step feeling like walking toward a court-martial. The Admiral's aide waved her through without the usual pleasantries, which confirmed this wasn't a routine meeting. Morrison stood at his window, looking out over the base with the expression of someone who'd just received news that would haunt him. He was 58, silver-haired, with the kind of presence that made junior officers stand straighter without being told. Kiera respected him, which made the deception of the past 24 hours taste like ashes. "Sir," she said, coming to attention. Morrison turned. "At ease, Colonel, we have a problem and I need your expertise." He gestured to a briefing folder on his desk. "SEAL Team 3. They've been dark for 72 hours. JSOC wants to know why I'm not organizing a rescue operation." Kiera's mind raced. She couldn't tell him about the investigation without proof. She couldn't ignore his direct question without raising suspicion. And she definitely couldn't mention that she'd been running an unauthorized intelligence operation for the past day. Last intelligence suggested they were maintaining operational security during a sensitive phase of their reconnaissance, Kiera said carefully. "Is there new information suggesting they're compromised?" Morrison studied her face with the intensity of someone who'd spent 30 years reading people in high-pressure situations. "That's what I'm trying to determine. Their mission was supposed to be simple: observe a suspected Taliban logistics hub, report back, extract. Now I'm getting questions from the Pentagon about why we sent a SEAL team into the Panjshir Valley with no backup plan and minimal support." Kiera kept her expression neutral. "Sir, I need to review the mission parameters to answer that accurately. My understanding was that Team 3 requested a light footprint to maintain stealth." "That was my understanding too," Morrison said. "But someone at JSOC is suggesting the mission parameters were modified after insertion, which would be a massive security breach if true. They're sending investigators to review all our operations planning, starting tomorrow." "Perfect." Investigators would find Webb's activities, but they'd also find Kiera's unauthorized surveillance, Alexis's presence on base, and every decision that had seemed necessary in the moment but looked dangerously close to insubordination in hindsight. "I can provide full documentation of Team 3's planning and execution," Kiera offered. "If there were modifications I wasn't aware of, we need to identify who authorized them." Morrison nodded slowly. "That's exactly what I need you to do. Pull every file, every communication, every decision point that touched Team 3's operation. I want a complete audit on my desk by 800 tomorrow." He paused, and his voice softened slightly. "Kiera, I know you care about the teams. Everyone in this command does. But if someone made unauthorized changes to a live operation, that's not just a career ender. That's people dying because of bureaucratic games. I need you to be thorough, objective, and above all, honest about what you find." The weight of his words pressed down on her shoulders. Morrison was giving her exactly what she needed: authorization to investigate the operation fully. But he was also trusting her to be the person he thought she was, someone who'd put truth above personal loyalty, protocol above expedience. "Understood, sir," Kiera said. "You'll have the audit by 800. She left his office feeling like she'd just walked through a minefield in the dark and somehow avoided detonation. The 48-hour timeline had just collapsed to less than 18 hours, and she still didn't have enough proof to move against Webb without it looking like a vendetta based on circumstantial evidence. Back in her office, she found Alexis waiting, perched on the edge of the desk like a predatory bird ready to take flight. "We have a problem," they both said simultaneously. Kiera went first, explaining Morrison's request and the incoming investigators. Alexis's expression grew darker with each detail. "If JSOC investigates, they'll find Webb's activities," Alexis said. "But they'll also classify everything, bury it in bureaucratic process, and Team 3 will become acceptable losses while the review board determines whether proper procedure was followed." "Or we move now," Kiera said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "We have enough to arrest Webb on security violations. Once he's in custody, we leverage him for information about Team 3 and whoever else is involved." Alexis shook her head. "Arresting him tips our hand. His network goes dark, evidence gets destroyed, and we lose any chance of finding the whole organization. You said it yourself. This is bigger than one corrupt officer. Kiera wanted to argue, but the tactical logic was sound. They were dancing on the edge of a knife, trying to balance immediate action against long-term success, and every choice seemed designed to maximize damage regardless of the direction they chose. Then we need leverage, Kiera said. Something that forces Webb to move before the investigators arrive. If he thinks he's about to be exposed, he'll either run or contact his handlers to protect himself. Either way, we get the information we need. Alexis considered this, her eyes distant with calculation. We could leak information suggesting the investigation is focused on him specifically. Make him panic, force a mistake. That's entrapment, Kiera said, or close enough that it won't hold up if this goes to trial. You're assuming this goes to trial, Alexis countered. If Webb is working with foreign intelligence, he won't get a trial. He'll get a classified detention, an intelligence debriefing under duress, and a grave marker that lists his death as a training accident. That's how these things work when national security is involved. Kiera knew she was right. She'd seen enough classified operations to understand that justice and legal process were luxuries reserved for situations that didn't threaten operational security. But knowing it and accepting it were different things, and she'd spent her career trying to stay on the right side of that line. We do this legally, Kiera said firmly, or we don't do it at all. I'm not becoming the thing we're fighting just because it's expedient. Alexis studied her for a long moment, and something like respect flickered across her features. Okay, legal, but we're still running out of time. Kiera pulled up Webb's file again, studying his background for weaknesses they could exploit. 15 years of service, divorced twice, no children, parents deceased. His service record was exemplary until 3 years ago, when something subtle shifted: more overseas travel, increased access to classified operations, a pattern of behavior that suggested someone had recruited him and spent time developing him as an asset. What happened 3 years ago? Kiera wondered aloud. Alexis moved closer, scanning the timeline. Financial crisis. His second divorce cost him nearly everything: house, savings, retirement account. He filed for bankruptcy, and then suddenly, 6 months later, the case was dismissed and his account showed cash influxes that the court documents don't explain. Someone paid off his debts, Kiera said. Classic recruitment tactic. Find someone in financial trouble, offer them a lifeline, and by the time they realize what they're involved in, they're too deep to get out. Which means he's probably desperate to keep the money flowing, Alexis added. If we can threaten his income stream, he might make contact with his handlers to secure his position. Kiera nodded slowly, an idea forming. What if we arrange for his consulting firm in Dubai to have banking problems? Nothing dramatic, just enough to freeze his accounts and make him nervous. He'll have to contact whoever's paying him to fix it, and when he does, we'll have confirmation of the network. That's actually elegant, Alexis admitted. But it requires access to international banking systems and the kind of intelligence reach that neither of us officially has. No, Kiera said with a slight smile, but I know someone who does. She pulled out her secure phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in 5 years. The line rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered, thick with sleep and irritation. This better be important, Reaper. It's 3 in the morning here. Hello, Cypher, Kiera said, using the call sign from a shared deployment that felt like another lifetime. I need a favor, the kind that doesn't appear in any official reports. There was a pause, filled with the sound of rustling sheets and a woman's voice asking a question in the background. Then, how illegal are we talking? Somewhere between unethical and treasonous, depending on who's asking. Another pause, longer this time, then a low chuckle. Okay, I'm interested. What do you need? Kiera explained the situation in broad strokes, leaving out enough details to maintain operational security while conveying the urgency. Cypherial name Thomas Rivera, currently assigned to the National Security Agency's Tailored Access Operations Division, listened without interrupting. When Kiera finished, he was silent for so long that she thought the connection had dropped. You understand what you're asking me to do, Cypher said finally. You're asking me to conduct unauthorized financial warfare against a foreign entity based on circumstantial evidence gathered during an illegal surveillance operation. If this goes wrong, we both end up in Leavenworth. I know, Kiera said, and I wouldn't ask if 6 operators' lives weren't on the line. Yeah, you would, Cypher said, but there was affection in his voice. You've always been willing to break rules for the people counting on you. It's one of the things I respect about you, even when it terrifies me. Kiera felt warmth in her chest, the kind that came from being known by someone who'd seen you at your worst and still chose to trust you. So you'll help. Give me 4 hours, Cypher said. I'll make Dubai's banking system develop a sudden interest in that consulting firm's accounts. But Reaper, after this, you owe me something so expensive that I haven't figured out what it is yet. Done, Kiera said. And Cypher, thank you. Don't thank me until we see if this actually works, he said and disconnected. Kiera set down the phone and found Alexis watching her with an expression somewhere between admiration and concern. You have interesting friends, Alexis observed. I have the friends that 20 years of special operations require, Kiera corrected. Some of them just happen to have skills that make compliance officers nervous. 4 hours later, at precisely 14:30 local time in Dubai, the consulting firm that had been funneling money to Marcus Webb discovered that their accounts had been frozen pending investigation into suspicious transaction patterns. The firm's lawyers immediately began making calls, but the banking authorities were remarkably unhelpful, citing international financial regulations that appeared to have been invented specifically for this situation. At 15:32, Webb's personal encrypted phone rang. Kiera's surveillance team watched him step outside the building, walk to his car, and spend 17 minutes in an animated conversation with someone who was clearly not happy about the banking problems. When he returned to his desk, his hands were shaking. He's spooked, the surveillance analyst reported. Heart rate elevated, stress indicators off the charts. He's going to make a move. Stay on him, Kiera ordered. I want to know everyone he contacts, everything he accesses, and anywhere he goes. For the next 6 hours, Webb operated like a man trying to keep a dozen spinning plates from crashing. He made 3 more calls on his encrypted phone, accessed files he had no operational reason to view, and at 2200 he left the base and drove to a hotel 20 miles away. He's meeting someone, Alexis said, watching the GPS tracker on the surveillance feed. This is it. Kiera felt adrenaline flooding her system, the same chemical rush she'd experienced before combat missions. Everything hinged on the next few hours. Either they'd confirm Webb's conspiracy and get the information needed to save Team 3, or they'd watch him disappear into a network they couldn't penetrate, taking their only lead with him. I'm going to the hotel, Alexis said, already moving toward the door. No, Kiera said sharply. If you spook him, we lose everything. Let surveillance handle it. Surveillance will take pictures and file reports, Alexis countered. I'll get answers. There's a difference. Kiera wanted to argue, but she recognized the look in Alexis's eyes. It was the same look she'd seen in her own reflection before missions that required going beyond what the manual allowed. Some operations couldn't be run from a desk, no matter how sophisticated the technology. Take backup, Kiera said finally. And for God's sake, don't do anything that can't be explained in a court-martial. Alexis smiled grimly. I'll try to keep it to minor felonies. She disappeared into the California night, leaving Kiera alone with her screens and her conscience. On the monitors, Webb's GPS signal showed him entering the hotel. Thermal imaging from a surveillance drone Kiera had quietly redirected showed 2 heat signatures in a room on the 3rd floor. Kiera pulled up the hotel's security footage, technically illegal without a warrant, but she'd stopped counting violations hours ago. The second person in the room was a woman, early 40s, expensive suit, carrying herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to operating in dangerous spaces. Kiera ran facial recognition and got a hit from Interpol databases. Nadia Volkov, listed as a consultant for various international firms, suspected of connections to Russian intelligence. No arrests, but multiple investigations that had mysteriously lost funding before reaching conclusions. Of course it's the Russians, Kiera muttered. It was always the Russians when money and intelligence intersected in special operations. The surveillance team's audio feed crackled to life, picking up conversation from inside the hotel room. Webb's voice came through first, tight with stress. "You said the accounts were secure. You said there was no way to trace the money." Nadia's response was calm, almost bored. "There wasn't until someone started asking very specific questions. Someone with resources that suggest military intelligence involvement. Who have you told about our arrangement?" "No one," Webb said quickly. "I've been careful, just like you taught me." "Then explain how your accounts became a target within hours of a SEAL team disappearing in Afghanistan. That's not coincidence, Marcus. That's someone connecting dots that should never have been visible." The pieces clicked into place in Kiera's mind. Webb hadn't just sold information about Team 3, he'd been selling intelligence on special operations for years, and Nadia had been his handler, funneling money through Dubai while extracting secrets that had cost American lives. "We need to extract you," Nadia continued. "Tonight. There's a flight to Moscow in 4 hours. You'll be on it or you'll be in custody by morning. Choose quickly." Kiera's hand hovered over her phone. She should call the FBI, let them handle the arrest, follow proper channels that would result in Webb and Nadia being detained legally. But that would mean losing the information about Team 3, watching the investigation disappear into bureaucratic process while 6 operators ran out of time. Or she could trust Alexis to do what needed to be done, consequences be damned. The decision should have been harder. Maybe the fact that it wasn't said something about how far she'd already drifted from the officer she'd been 24 hours ago. She let the phone stay on the desk. On the surveillance feed, Alexis appeared in the hotel hallway, moving with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent years operating in denied territory. She was alone. No backup, no official sanction. Just one woman against a Russian intelligence officer and a traitor who'd sold out his own people for money. Kiera wanted to call her off, to stop this before it became something that couldn't be undone. But she'd made her choice when she let Alexis leave the base, and now all she could do was watch. Alexis knocked on the hotel room door. Through the surveillance feed, Kiera saw Nadia's hand move to a weapon concealed beneath her jacket. Webb looked like he was about to vomit. "Room service," Alexis called, her voice carrying just the right note of bored professionalism. Nadia checked the peephole, saw what appeared to be a hotel employee, and made her first mistake. She opened the door. What happened next occurred too fast for the surveillance cameras to capture clearly. Alexis moved through the doorway, her hand striking Nadia's wrist before the weapon could clear the jacket. They went down together, a blur of controlled violence that ended with Nadia on the floor, unconscious, and Alexis pointing a pistol at Webb's chest. "Hello, Marcus," Alexis said conversationally. "We need to talk about Team 3. Webb raised his hands, his face pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't. That's why you're in a hotel room with a Russian intelligence officer discussing your imminent flight to Moscow. Very innocent behavior." Kiera listened to the exchange, her heart pounding. This was it, the moment where everything either came together or fell apart spectacularly. "I want a lawyer," Webb said, his voice shaking. "Of course you do," Alexis said. "But here's the thing, Marcus. We both know that if you get a lawyer, if this goes through official channels, Team 3 dies. You might beat the charges, good lawyers can work miracles, but those 6 men will be dead before the paperwork gets filed. Is that what you want?" "I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt," Webb said, and the pathetic sincerity in his voice made Kiera's stomach turn. "I just needed the money, the divorce, the debts. They said it was just information, nothing that would get anyone killed." "You believe them?" Alexis's voice carried disbelief sharp enough to cut. "You've been in the intelligence community for 15 years, and you believe that selling operation details to the Russians wouldn't result in casualties." Webb's silence was answer enough. Alexis pressed forward. "Here's how this works. You tell me everything about Team 3, their real mission, who changed the parameters, what the Russians know, and where they're being held. You do that in the next 5 minutes, and maybe I don't shoot you in this hotel room and call it self-defense." "You wouldn't," Webb said, but his voice wavered. "Wouldn't I?" Alexis asked. "You've been selling information that got American service members killed. You think anyone's going to question too hard if a DIA operative puts you down while you were fleeing to Moscow? Kiera's hands clenched into fists. She should intervene, should call this off before Alexis did something that crossed lines they couldn't uncross. But the cold logic of special operations warfare said that sometimes you needed someone willing to operate outside the rules, to do things that official channels couldn't sanction, because the alternative was watching good people die while you followed procedure. Team 3 was sent to eliminate a Taliban commander, Webb said finally, his words spilling out in a rush. But the commander is a Russian asset being protected because he facilitates money laundering for oligarchs through the heroin trade. When I told Nadia about the operation, she had her people adjust the mission parameters, send the team deeper into hostile territory where they could be captured instead of killed. Why capture instead of kill? Alexis demanded. Dead SEALs are investigated. Missing SEALs become a diplomatic incident. Russia wants to use them as leverage, either to extract concessions from the U.S. government or to trade for something they value more. They're being held in a compound 20 clicks north of where their last position was reported. Alexis glanced at the camera Kiera knew she'd spotted on entry, a subtle signal that the information was being recorded. Who else is involved? How many others have you compromised? Webb's face crumbled. I don't know. Nadia handled everything. I just provided information when she asked, and money appeared in my account. I never knew what they did with it. Kiera had heard enough. She grabbed her secure phone and called Morrison's direct line. The Admiral answered on the first ring, his voice alert despite the late hour. Sir, this is Colonel Havelock. I have actionable intelligence on Team 3's location and confirmation of internal compromise. I need immediate authorization to organize an extraction operation. There was a pause. Then how solid is this intelligence? Solid enough to stake my career on it, sir. We have a hostile force holding 6 American operators in the Panjshir Valley, and we have less than 12 hours before the situation becomes unsalvageable. Another pause, longer this time. Kiera could practically hear Morrison's mind working through implications, calculating risks, weighing the cost of action against the price of inaction. You're authorized, Morrison said finally. But Kiera, if this goes sideways, if we lose more people trying to save 6, that's on both of us. Make sure you're right. I am, sir, Kiera said, praying she wasn't lying. She disconnected and immediately pulled up contact lists for extraction specialists, close air support pilots, and the kind of special operators who could put together a mission with minimal planning and maximum violence. This was what she trained for: coordinating complex operations under impossible timelines, balancing limited resources against critical objectives, making decisions that would either save lives or end careers. At the hotel, Alexis had zip-tied Webb and Nadia, called local FBI to arrange pickup, and was already moving toward her vehicle. Kiera's phone buzzed with an incoming message. Package secured. Intelligence confirmed. Ready to move when you are. Kiera allowed herself exactly 5 seconds of relief before shifting into operational mode. She had 12 hours to plan and execute a rescue operation in some of the most hostile terrain on Earth, using assets she'd need to assemble on the fly, while keeping the whole thing quiet enough that whoever else was involved in Webb's conspiracy didn't have time to react. It was impossible. It was insane. It was exactly the kind of mission that defined special operations warfare. She pulled up a secure conference line and started making calls. First call went to Major Christina Valdez, an old friend from her flying days who now commanded a squadron of CV-22 Ospreys at Bagram Airfield in Afghanistan. Chris, I need a favor that's going to sound crazy. How crazy are we talking? Valdez asked, amusement and concern competing in her voice. The kind where I can't tell you the full details, but I need 2 Ospreys fueled and ready to fly into denied territory within 8 hours. Off the books, minimal crew, and absolute operational security. Valdez was quiet for a long moment. Kiera, what have you gotten yourself into? Something necessary. Can you do it? Another pause. Then, I can have birds ready in 6 hours, but you're coming on this mission personally to explain why I'm risking my career. Deal, Kiera said, already knowing she'd planned to be on the extraction herself. Some operations you couldn't coordinate from a bunker. You had to be willing to share the risk with the people you were sending into danger. Second call went to a secure number that didn't technically exist in any official database. A gruff voice answered, "Halcyon Solutions. How can we help you?" Halcyon was a private military contractor staffed largely by former special operations personnel. They handled jobs that official channels couldn't touch, operating in the gray spaces where national security and plausible deniability intersected. Kiera had used them twice before, both times for operations that had never appeared in any after-action report. "This is Colonel Havelock, Naval Special Warfare Command. I need a tactical package for a direct action mission in Afghanistan. Six-person extraction, hostile territory, minimal support. Timeline is 12 hours. "That's tight," the voice said. "What's the pay structure?" "Whatever your standard rate is plus 50% hazard bonus. Full operational support from military assets and my personal guarantee that if this goes wrong, I take the fall." "Sold. Give me coordinates and mission parameters." Kiera spent the next 2 hours building an operation that violated approximately 17 different regulations and probably a few international laws. The plan was simple in concept, terrifying in execution. 2 Ospreys would insert a rescue team north of Team 3's location, while Kiera provided tactical coordination and close air support from an F-16. She'd requisition through channels that would take weeks to untangle. The rescue team would hit the compound hard and fast, extract Team 3, and be wheels up before enemy reinforcements could respond. Simple. Except that simple plans in hostile territory had a way of becoming catastrophically complex the moment real bullets started flying. At 400, Kiera found herself in a flight suit for the first time in 3 years, running through pre-flight checks on an F-16 that technically belonged to the Air National Guard and definitely wasn't supposed to be in her hands. The crew chief watched her work with the expression of someone who decided that plausible deniability was more valuable than asking questions. "Ma'am, I'm not going to ask what you're doing," he said, "but I'm going to log this as a routine maintenance check flight. Which means you need to be back on the ground in 6 hours or my paperwork gets very complicated." "Understood," Kiera said, settling into the cockpit with the familiar weight of a helmet and the smell of jet fuel that had defined so much of her life. "And Chief, I was never here." "Never here," he agreed. "Good hunting, Reaper." The call sign hit her like a punch. She hadn't flown combat operations in years, hadn't been Reaper 6 since she'd transitioned from the cockpit to the command center. But as the F-16's engine spooled up and the canopy sealed her into the aircraft, she felt muscle memory awakening. The 1,000 small checks and adjustments that turned a person into a weapons platform capable of controlled violence at supersonic speeds. She taxied to the runway, received clearance from a tower controller who definitely knew something unusual was happening but had apparently decided not to care, and pushed the throttle forward. The F-16 leaped into the California night, climbing through darkness toward stars that had guided warriors for millennia. Kiera leveled off at 30,000 feet and turned east, toward Afghanistan, toward 6 Americans who didn't know rescue was coming, toward a fight that would either redeem her career or end it in fire and recrimination. The sun rose over the Pacific as she crossed into international airspace. Ahead, somewhere in the mountains of the Hindu Kush, Team 3 was counting hours and calculating whether this was the day their luck finally ran out. Kiera checked her weapons systems, confirmed her tanker rendezvous time, and allowed herself a tight smile. She'd spent 3 years coordinating operations from behind a desk, keeping her hands clean and her conscience clear through careful adherence to regulations that had sometimes felt like chains. But some fights required you to remember who you'd been before the system shaped you into something manageable. Some missions demanded that you look at the rules, acknowledge their importance, and then break every single one because the alternative was unconscionable. Reaper 6 was flying again, and God help anyone who got between her and the people she'd sworn to protect. The radio crackled Valdez's voice, transmitted through encrypted channels from Bagram. "Reaper, This is Falcon Lead. We have 2 birds ready to fly. Halcyon team is aboard and loaded for bear, just waiting on your authorization. Kiera glanced at her tactical display, calculating distances and timing. 8 hours until she reached Afghan airspace. 6 hours until Valdez's Ospreys would need to launch to make the insertion window. Everything was balanced on a knife's edge, dependent on intelligence from a traitor, planned by people operating outside official sanction, and executed by operators who understood the mission might end with medals or prison time depending on how the political winds blew. She keyed her microphone. Falcon Lead, this is Reaper 6. Mission is authorized. Insert on my mark at coordinates I'm sending now. Rules of engagement are weapons free on any hostile forces. Priority is extraction of 6 American personnel designated Package Alpha. Secondary priority is elimination of enemy intelligence assets. Tertiary priority is getting everyone home alive. Copy all, Reaper, Valdez said. And just so you know, whatever this is about, whatever rules we're breaking, I'm glad you're the one running it. See you over target. The connection cut, leaving Kiera alone with the jet's engine noise and her thoughts. She'd crossed the line. There was no going back now. No way to claim she'd been following orders or operating within established guidelines. She'd taken operational control of military assets for an unauthorized mission based on intelligence gathered through illegal surveillance. If this succeeded, she might survive with her career intact. If it failed, she'd spend the rest of her life explaining to courts-martial boards why she'd thought she was above the rules that governed everyone else. But as she streaked across the Pacific at 600 miles per hour, racing toward a fight that would determine whether 6 operators lived or died, Kiera found that she didn't regret the choice. Some things mattered more than careers. Some people deserved someone willing to risk everything for them. And if 20 years of service had taught her anything, it was that the difference between a hero and a martyr often came down to whether you succeeded spectacularly or failed publicly. She intended to succeed. The alternative was unacceptable.